As part of the wreckage of the disaster that has befallen Washington with the removal of the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, has been the issue of U.S. support, financial and otherwise, to Kiev in its war against Russia. Now, as probably is very common knowledge at this point already, part of the reason why McCarthy was removed as Speaker had to do with the budget he passed, or the continuing resolution to avoid a government shutdown just a few days before that. And a big component of that was his decision, or rather his not his decision so much as what he had to do to get the CR passed, to withhold the money for Ukraine, which had been in both the Senate and the House versions, and he had to strip that out. So it was the only way that he was going to get the budget passed. And that is obviously a real sticking point with quite a number of people, because of the ramifications it has both for American policy and for the war in Ukraine. Now, there are some issues that need to be discussed here, which are not evident on the surface of it, and that's what we're going to dive into here. First of all, let me show you just a part of a segment that CNN did that shows what the situation is on the ground, and pay attention to the last part, because I want you to notice what the National Security Advisor, Danilov, of Ukraine has to say about this issue.
Ukraine's 80th Airborne Assault Brigade storming Russian positions on the Eastern Front, using U.S.-made weapons to try and dislodge Vladimir Putin's troops. Gains that would probably be impossible if Washington cut military assistance. This soldier, whom we can only name as Vasil, tells me, "I don't know what to say. That would be tough," he said. Losing U.S. assistance would be catastrophic, Ukraine admits, but the National Security Advisor tells CNN he doesn't believe it will be cut. "We are more than confident that this will not happen," he says, "if the United States is a country responsible for the democratic world and has assumed this responsibility. It would be a great joy for Putin and all autocratic regimes if the U.S. withdrew the assistance it provides us."
Okay, look, let me just say, as I often do, I totally understand Danilov's position here. He is the National Security Advisor for a country that's been invaded, and he's fighting for his life. So he's going to say whatever he needs to say and do whatever he needs to do to get support for his country. But we have to look at this from more than just one lens. It's not just what's happening in Ukraine, but it's also with the American interest. And American interests are not synonymous with Ukraine's interest. And look, this is not just money that America is potentially going to give to Ukraine, or that we have already with 113 billion so far. This is your money. And let's be clear on that. And your interests are not necessarily synonymous with Ukraine's interest as well. And unfortunately, I do have to disagree with one thing Danilov said, because it's unfortunately kind of an understood situation that a lot of people believe out in the world and in the United States, is that the U.S., he said, has an obligation to defend democracy around the world. And no, we don't have, that's not our role. That's not our authority, that we're like, the statement is overused, but we're not the global policemen that go around enforcing our view of democracy on the world. And if someone doesn't agree with it, that somehow we have the authority or even the capacity to step in and, quote, set it right. We don't have that capacity. It doesn't matter what people think, or if they want it to be that way, it isn't that way. And their words to the contrary doesn't make any difference. It's not real. It's not true. So Danilov is not correct in saying that basically we have an obligation to continue to do this. And he's also not on very safe ground to just say, oh, I have confidence it's going to happen. That's not confidence that he should have here. And as evidence of that, we see, even aside from this issue of the budget that was passed, or what may happen next, is the issue of what the American people are thinking, what you're thinking. Now, there have been two polls in the recent days come out, one on CNN and another on ABC News, that reach very similar conclusions, that the American people, you, are losing their interest in continuing to support this open-ended thing. Now, instead, as I heard John Kirby do just yesterday, instead of dogging the American people and saying, hey, that they understand what's at stake here, and they're going to come around, they're going to view this. Is that really the case? Because look, I think that we need to delve more into what the American view is and why those numbers are diminishing. And it's something that our government needs to come to grips with. It's not just that we're losing interest or we're having war fatigue, because a lot of people want to dismiss it as that and say, well, they can be brought back around. The issue is we don't see our money producing any benefit to our country. We don't even see it having an impact on the ground in Ukraine. Look, how can you blame Americans for looking at this and saying, okay, since say December of last year, where the lines were, basically where the front lines were, they're hardly any different today, almost no difference. And especially if you look at it on a large scale, on the level of the country, they're not any changed at all. But what has changed a lot is that America has sent scores of billions of dollars since December of last year. We have provided literally thousands of American military vehicles, some of our best stuff like the Abrams tank, the Bradley fighting vehicles, Stryker fighting vehicles, our Patriot air defense systems. I mean, I'm talking about some high quality stuff that we've sent along with that. We've also given them an intelligence support, targeting support, ammunition, all kinds of support in addition to money and even domestic support for their economy. But yet we don't see any difference on the ground. So it's a reasonable question that Americans should ask. If all of our money, all of our support, all of our items that we've sent, which has degraded our own national security capacity, if that hasn't moved the needle at all in Ukraine, upon what basis should our government tell us that we have to keep giving money at the same rate into the future? And I think that's a very valid question. And unfortunately, I don't hear anybody answering it. It seems that the government is just assuming, or at least some in our government, are just assuming that it's, quote, what we have to do. And there's no thought to it. Before we continue to pass another budget, before we continue to give any more money, I think it is incumbent upon our government to explain to American people why what they have seen for the last 9 months, 10 months almost, why that another 10 months is going to have a different outcome. Because what doesn't make any sense is to say, look, let's give another $100 billion to Ukraine because they're fighting a war and it's not going to make any difference. More Ukrainians are going to die. More cities are going to get turned to pulverized into rubble, but the lines aren't going to change and the war is not going to, the outcome is not going to change because there's no evidence that that is going to be the case. So Americans want to know an answer to that question. You deserve an answer to that question. Why is it that no one's giving you any information, just saying, give us more of your money? Because I don't think that's what we should do at all. And look, this is very real. And let's be honest about it. If America doesn't provide any more support, there is almost no way that Ukraine can continue the war. But rather than saying, well, then I guess we do have to, no, that means that there are other hard choices, difficult choices that have to be faced by the Ukrainian side as well as our government, especially in the Ukrainian side. If we're honest in saying, look, right now, according to Kirby earlier today, there still is about, I guess, 2 to 3 months of continued support at their earlier levels because the money that's previously been allocated is still in the pipeline. And it's not like that the support stops today. So there's still time to go in there. But we need to be honest and tell the Ukraine side that we don't know if any more money is coming. We don't know if the level of support that it has been the case is going to continue on unchanged, much less increase. And that means that they have to make some hard decisions. Do they want to fight without the support that they're getting from the West, without all the ammunition, the resupply for tanks, the logistics that go along with that to keep the ones that they have going? Or do they want to say, we now have to consider what is, a horrible possibility of coming up and trying to seek a negotiated settlement to end the war? That's a hard choice that they have to be made. But listen to this. Be careful that you understand this. To say, no, we don't want them to settle, so let's keep giving them money and ammunition and tanks at the same rate. But if that's not going to change the outcome, then we have to say that's not a good use of American money. To continue to decrease our inventory of ammunition, our inventory of combat vehicles, that doesn't change the outcome there. We have to be hard and answer those questions for ourselves. Is this a good expense of American capacity and money? Now, I argue that it's not, that evidence that we've seen over 19 months of war is clear evidence that there's nothing fundamentally going to change and more money is just going to be going down a bad hole. That's just the harsh truth of it. And even though we don't like the answer, that's the reality. That's the truth. Now, this whole drama playing out in Washington about the Speaker of the House, and we're going to do a deep dive on that here coming up shortly, because that's a really important thing. It's historic, never happened in America. But one of the key issues about that is going to be what's going to happen with the funding, because that was one of the key issues about the disagreement that many in Congress had, both within the Republican Party and between the Republicans and Democrats. It is no sure thing that additional separate bills are going to be passed to continue to fund the war. Already the Senate, which had originally wanted to pass a $24 billion support budget, had ramped it down to, I think, between $6 and $8 billion to try to make it more palatable to be passed. And even that didn't survive. So it's unclear at all if any kind of bill is going to be supported. Now, I just can't imagine that the Congress would literally go to zero and cut it off and never do anything else. But I can see the possibility that they're going to say, we're going to do a limited amount here, and there's going to come with some sticking points on this. There's going to be some requirements put onto this that maybe haven't been there before. And that means that you're going to have to produce some kind of tangible evidence that this is actually making a difference. I can see that happening, but it's unlikely that the money that we have supported in that rate is going to continue on. And everybody needs to come to grips with this. And look, the American people, again, that's you, are making their voice clear, and it's moving in a definite trending direction. And the evidence on the ground is accelerating that move. And I bet more people are going to be joining you and asking those hard questions. Give me some tangible reason why we should continue giving this money, and show me any reason at all why it might succeed. And if the government can't do that, if the supporters of the war can't provide valid, legitimate answers to that, then we have to say it's time to do something different. And just giving money as long as it takes is not going to be a good and viable solution. It's time to do something different in light of reality. And that's your deep dive for today. Thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe, and pass this along to anybody else you think would like to hear the truth about things and want to know more that's deeper behind just a small soundbite they may hear on other networks, because we're out here for you, and we're going to keep giving you videos just like this so that you know what's really going on. Thanks. See you later.